Picture a city so powerful that people talked about it in whispers from Britain to Egypt. That city was Rome. Its mighty walls and beautiful buildings still stand today, reminding us of a time when one city ruled most of the known world. The Romans gave us many amazing things: roads that connected far-off places, laws that shaped how we live today, and buildings that still make us stop and stare. Subscribe now to journey through Rome's darkest days and meet the emperors who made history for all the wrong reasons. But power can make people do terrible things. While some Roman rulers built great things and helped their people, others used their power to hurt and destroy. They turned their beautiful palaces into places of fear. They changed fancy dinner parties into deadly traps. These rulers had everything anyone could want: money, power, and armies at their command. But they wanted more, always more. These are the stories of Rome's most evil rulers, men who could order someone's death as easily as they ordered their breakfast, men who played with people's lives like children play with toys. Some people say they were crazy. Others say power made them cruel. But one thing's for sure, their stories still shock us today, even after 2,000 years. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a story about what happens when someone gets too much power and loses their mind using it. It's about emperors who started wars for fun, who killed their own families, and who thought they were gods. These rulers didn't just kill people. They found new and terrible ways to be cruel. But why should we care about these rulers today? Because their stories teach us something important. Power can turn even normal people into monsters. And when nobody can stop a ruler from doing whatever they want, terrible things can happen. The year was 37 CE. The Roman people were celebrating in the streets. Their new emperor, Caligula, was young, handsome, and full of promise. They loved him because he was the son of their beloved military hero, Germanicus. When Caligula walked through Rome's streets, people threw flowers at his feet. They thought he would be the perfect ruler. At first, Caligula seemed like a dream come true. He freed people from prison who had been locked up unfairly. He put on amazing shows in the arena. He even gave money to poor people. The Romans thought they had found their perfect leader, but they were wrong, very wrong. Something changed in Caligula after he got sick with a fever. When he recovered, he was different. It was like someone had replaced their kind emperor with a monster wearing his face. The man who once helped the poor now spent Rome's money like it was water. He built a huge bridge made of boats just so he could ride his horse across the sea. He said it was because he could do anything he wanted. But wasting money was just the start. Caligula began doing things that seemed crazy to everyone. He said he was no longer human. He was a god. He made people worship him. He even turned part of the royal palace into a temple for himself. But his strangest act? He made his horse a government official. Yes, a horse. He gave it a marble house and servants, and wanted to make it a consul, one of Rome's highest positions. The cruelty came next. Caligula found new ways to hurt people every day. He would sit at fancy dinners and suddenly order someone's death just because he was bored. He made parents watch their children die. He laughed while people were tortured. If someone looked too happy, he might kill them for not being sad enough about his sister's death. If they looked too sad, he'd kill them for not being happy enough about him being emperor. The Romans learned quickly that their dream emperor had become a nightmare. But nobody dared to speak against him. One wrong word, one wrong look, and your whole family might disappear. People started saying prayers before going to the palace, not because they thought Caligula was a god, but because they were afraid they wouldn't come back alive. This couldn't last forever. After 4 years of Caligula's madness, a group of his own guards decided to end it. They waited until he was walking alone through a dark tunnel under his palace. The guards attacked, stabbing him 30 times. Caligula's last words were, "I'm still alive." But not for long. The monster was dead. Rome breathed a sigh of relief. They thought no emperor could ever be this bad again. But they were wrong. Caligula was just the beginning. As terrible as he was, worse rulers were coming. Much worse. Caligula taught Rome a frightening lesson. Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding in the dark. Sometimes they're the ones sitting on golden thrones, wearing purple robes, and calling themselves gods. His 4 years of rule changed Rome forever. It showed that anyone, even a beloved young ruler, could become a monster if they got too much power. The Romans tried to erase Caligula from their history. They melted down his statues. They scratched out his name from their records. They wanted to forget him. But some stories are too terrible to forget. Even today, 2,000 years later, we still use Caligula's name as a warning about what happens when power falls into the wrong hands. After Caligula's death, Rome thought things would get better. Then came Nero. Imagine a spoiled teenager getting the keys to the greatest empire in the world. That's exactly what happened when Nero became emperor at just 16 years old. At first, his mother Agrippina ran things from behind the scenes. She had killed and plotted to make her son emperor, and now she wanted to control him like a puppet. But Nero had other plans. He didn't want to be anyone's puppet, not even his mother's. He liked parties more than politics. He wanted to be an artist, a singer, an actor. The problem was, he wasn't very good at any of these things. But when you're the emperor, everyone has to pretend you're amazing, even if you sound like a donkey trying to sing. Young Nero started small with his cruelty. First, he poisoned his stepbrother, who might have become emperor instead of him. Then, he turned on his own mother. The woman who had killed to put him on the throne now found herself running for her life. After failing to kill her with a trick boat that was supposed to sink, Nero sent assassins to finish the job. As his mother lay dying, she told the killer, "Strike my womb, for this is what gave birth to such a monster." But killing his mother was just the beginning. Nero's real madness showed itself during the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. The fire burned for 6 days, destroying most of the city. While people lost their homes and lives, stories spread that Nero stood on a hill, playing his lyre like a small harp, and singing about the destruction of Troy. He watched Rome burn and turned it into his personal show. After the fire, Nero needed someone to blame. He picked the Christians, who were still a small new group in Rome. He arrested them and created horrible punishments. He covered them in animal skins and let wild dogs tear them apart. He burned them alive as human torches to light his garden parties. People who had once thought Nero was just silly now saw him for what he really was, a monster who made Caligula look tame. But Nero wasn't done yet. He kicked his pregnant wife to death. He married a man and dressed up as a bride. He built a massive golden palace on the land cleared by the fire, complete with a 120-foot statue of himself. While Rome was still rebuilding from the fire, Nero spent money like water on his own pleasures. He held parties that lasted for days, where people did things too shocking to even talk about. The Romans finally had enough. The governors of distant provinces started turning against him. The army began to rebel. The Senate, which had cowered before him for years, finally found its courage and declared him an enemy of Rome. Nero's world started falling apart. In the end, Nero died like a coward. When he heard soldiers were coming to arrest him, he couldn't even kill himself. He begged his secretary to help him commit suicide. His last words were, "What an artist dies in me." He was thinking about his singing until the very end, while Rome celebrated his death in the streets. Nero's rule taught Rome something new about bad emperors. Caligula had been openly cruel, but Nero showed that an emperor could destroy Rome while playing music and throwing parties. He proved that sometimes the most dangerous ruler isn't the one who acts like a monster, but the one who acts like an entertainer while doing monstrous things. After Nero's death, Rome fell into civil war. 4 different emperors ruled in a single year. The Romans thought they had seen the worst with Caligula and Nero, but history wasn't done with them yet. More cruel rulers were coming, each finding new ways to abuse their power and torment their people. After Nero's death, Rome had several good emperors. For almost 100 years, things were peaceful. Then came Commodus. He was different from Caligula and Nero because he should have known better. His father, Marcus Aurelius, was one of Rome's wisest rulers. Everyone expected Commodus to be just like him. Instead, he became one of Rome's biggest disappointments. Commodus was handsome and strong, and he knew it. While his father taught him about duty and wisdom, all young Commodus cared about was fighting and having fun. When he became emperor at age 18, he stopped pretending to be interested in boring things like running the empire. He had a new passion. He wanted to be a gladiator. Now, gladiators were like today's sports stars, but they were also considered low class. Imagine if a modern president quit their job to become a professional wrestler. That's how shocking it was when Commodus started fighting in the arena. But here's the thing, Commodus never fought fair. He arranged fights against injured soldiers and people who couldn't fight back. He killed rare animals like lions, elephants, and giraffes, often from a safe platform where they couldn't reach him. The emperor became obsessed with Hercules, the legendary strongman from myths. He started wearing lion skins like Hercules wore. He carried a club. He made people call him the Roman Hercules. He even ordered statues of himself dressed as Hercules to be put up all over Rome. But real heroes protect the weak, they don't bully them. While Commodus played gladiator, Rome fell apart. He didn't care about running the empire, so he sold important government jobs to anyone who could pay. Imagine if someone sold jobs like police chief or judge to the highest bidder. That's what Commodus did. The people he put in charge were usually criminals who stole from everyone else. Food became scarce, disease spread through the city, but Commodus didn't care as long as he could keep playing his games. His ego got bigger and crazier. He renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana, meaning Commodus's city. He renamed the months of the year after his own titles. He even renamed the Roman people Commodiani. It was like he wanted to erase Rome's history and replace it with himself. The more people suffered, the more Commodus partied. He held expensive shows in the arena while people starved. In 1 year, he fought in the arena 735 times. Each show cost the city a fortune, but no one dared tell him to stop. If anyone criticized him, they disappeared. The Roman Senate, which was supposed to help run the empire, became a group of terrified yes-men who clapped and cheered at everything Commodus did. Finally, even Commodus's closest friends had enough. They knew he was planning something big. He wanted to kill both consuls, Rome's highest officials, and take their place himself. On New Year's Eve, they decided to stop him. First, they tried poison, but it didn't work. So his wrestling trainer, a strong man named Narcissus, strangled him in his bath. The mighty Roman Hercules died like a common criminal. After his death, the Senate cursed his memory, the worst punishment they could give a dead emperor. They destroyed his statues and tried to erase him from history, but they couldn't erase the damage he had done. Commodus's reign marked the beginning of Rome's decline. His 12 years of misrule weakened the empire so much that it never really recovered. Commodus showed Rome something new about bad rulers. Unlike Caligula, who went mad with power, or Nero, who fiddled while Rome burned, Commodus simply didn't care about being an emperor at all. He treated ruling the greatest empire on earth like it was just a game, a show put on for his own entertainment. He proved that sometimes the worst ruler isn't the one who actively tries to destroy everything, but the one who lets everything fall apart while chasing their own glory. But even Commodus wasn't the last of Rome's bad emperors. The empire would face one more ruler who would shock everyone with his strange behavior and cruel decisions. Just when Romans thought they'd seen every kind of bad emperor possible, along came Elagabalus. Picture this. A 14-year-old boy becomes ruler of the greatest empire on earth. But this wasn't just any teenager. Elagabalus was a priest from Syria who had very different ideas about how things should be done in Rome. The story of how he became emperor is strange enough. His grandmother spread a rumor that he was the illegitimate son of the previous emperor. She bribed the army to support him. Soon, this teenage priest from a foreign land was wearing the purple robes of an emperor. The Romans were about to experience the strangest reign in their history. Elagabalus didn't care about Roman traditions. He brought his own god, a sun god from Syria. and said this new god was more powerful than all of Rome's gods put together. He built a huge temple for his god and forced senators to watch him dance around it for hours. Imagine the most powerful people in Rome watching a teenage emperor spinning and dancing while wearing makeup and expensive silk robes. But that was just the start of the scandal. Elagabalus loved to shock people. He would put on women's clothing and wear wigs, calling himself the empress. He married 5 times in 4 years. One of his wives was a Vestal virgin, a priestess who had taken sacred vows never to marry. This marriage was like spitting in the face of every Roman tradition. His parties became legendary for all the wrong reasons. He would fill rooms with rose petals until guests suffocated under them. He used special chairs that made embarrassing noises when people sat on them. He served his guests painted rocks instead of real food and released snakes into the crowd for fun. While these pranks might sound silly, remember, this was the person in charge of running an empire. The way he ran the government was just as chaotic. He gave important jobs to his friends based on the size of their private parts. He put dancers and chariot drivers in charge of the empire's most important offices. One day, he even gathered all of Rome's fortune tellers and asked them how he would die. When they told him he would be killed soon, he executed them all. Elagabalus spent money in ways that made even Nero look careful. He built a tower just so he could jump into a pile of cushions from the top. He created massive food fights in the palace while people in the city went hungry. He wore a new set of expensive clothes each day and never put on the same pair of shoes twice. The Romans put up with a lot from their emperors, but Elagabalus went too far. His own grandmother, who had helped him become emperor, realized he was too dangerous to keep around. She helped plot against him in favor of his cousin Alexander. When soldiers came for Elagabalus, he tried to hide in a chest. They found him, killed him, and dragged his body through the streets of Rome. The soldiers didn't stop there. They stabbed his body over and over, tied weights to it, and threw it into the Tiber River. They wanted to make sure his body would never be found and given a proper burial. Elagabalus was only 18 years old when he died. He had ruled Rome for just 4 years, but that was enough to earn him a place among Rome's most notorious rulers. What made Elagabalus different from other bad emperors? Caligula was cruel, Nero was destructive, and Commodus was selfish. But Elagabalus showed that an emperor could destroy Rome's traditions just by not taking anything seriously. He treated the empire like it was his personal playground. He didn't just break Roman laws and customs, he laughed at them. After Elagabalus, Rome would have other bad emperors, but none quite like these 4. Each of them showed a different way that absolute power could corrupt, through madness, cruelty, ego, or chaos. Their stories remind us that giving anyone too much power is dangerous, especially if that person isn't ready to handle it. These notorious rulers left their mark on Rome. Even today, thousands of years later, their names are remembered as warnings about what happens when the wrong person gets too much power. They remind us that sometimes the most dangerous person isn't the one who wants to conquer the world, but the one who inherits it and doesn't care what happens to it. 4 emperors, 4 different kinds of madness. Each one showed us something different about what happens when someone gets too much power. Let's look at what made each of these rulers stand out in Rome's dark history. Caligula taught us how quickly power can change someone. He started as Rome's golden boy, loved by everyone. But power twisted his mind until he thought he was a god. He showed us that the nicest person can become a monster when no one can tell them no. Nero proved that someone could destroy an empire while entertaining themselves. He played music while Rome burned. He killed people while pretending to be an artist. He showed us that sometimes the most dangerous leader isn't the one who acts like a monster, but the one who treats terrible things like they're just a show. Commodus was born with everything: a great father, the best education, and all the advantages anyone could want. But he threw it all away to play gladiator. He let Rome fall apart while he fought in the arena. He taught us that being born into power doesn't mean someone deserves it. And then there was Elagabalus, the teenage emperor who turned Rome's traditions into jokes. He didn't just break the rules, he laughed at them. He showed us that disrespecting tradition can be just as dangerous as violence and cruelty. These rulers had some things in common. They all got power when they were young. They all had people around them who told them they were perfect and could do no wrong. And they all thought the rules didn't apply to them because they were special. But there's something else these stories teach us. In each case, the Roman people put up with their rulers for years before doing anything about it. They were so afraid of chaos that they accepted monsters as leaders. By the time they finally stood up to these bad emperors, a lot of damage had already been done. These stories aren't just ancient history. Even today, people still gain power and misuse it. Some become cruel like Caligula. Others ignore their duties like Commodus. Some mock traditions like Elagabalus. And some fiddle while their world burns, just like Nero. That's why these stories still matter. They warn us about what happens when we give someone too much power. They remind us that power doesn't just corrupt, it reveals who people really are. And most importantly, they teach us that we shouldn't wait too long to stand up to bad leaders. Rome survived these terrible emperors, but each one left scars on the empire. Each bad ruler made it a little easier for the next one to be even worse. They proved that an empire can survive invasion, plague, and natural disasters. But the hardest thing to survive is bad leadership. So next time you hear someone say, "Absolute power corrupts absolutely," remember these four emperors. Remember how they started, what they became, and how they ended. Their stories might be 2,000 years old, but their lessons are as important today as they were in ancient Rome. Because in the end, the real power doesn't belong to emperors or rulers. It belongs to the people who choose whether to stand up to them or stay silent. And that's a lesson Rome learned the hard way.